Welcome to Canada Files. I'm Valerie Pringle. My guest today is Dr. Tak Mak, Senior Scientist at Princess Margaret Cancer Centre and Professor of Immunology at the University of Toronto. At the age of 30, Dr. Mak discovered the T-cell receptor and paved the way for modern immunotherapy drugs that have cured certain forms of cancer. His work is made more poignant by the fact that he lost his wife to cancer. Because of the exceptional nature of his discoveries and the continuity of his research, he's now in his late 70s, he ranks among the greatest scientists. Dr. Mak, hello.
Hi.
Your work has been groundbreaking. You're the most cited scientist, Canadian scientist. When you discovered and cloned the T-cell receptor in 1983, did you realize at that moment how monumental it was?
I have to say I didn't, although everybody around me was telling me that, and I guess I wasn't really in the field of immunology. I had no idea that it was that big, and it turned out to be much more than I had thought, yes.
Well, it was called the Holy Grail. How many people at that time do you figure were looking and trying to find the T-cell receptor?
I can only tell you one statistic. I gave a talk December 1983 at Harvard, and Professor Phil Leader, who's the chairman of genetics, told me there are 18 labs in the Department of Genetics alone looking for it.
But why do you think you were the one who managed to find the T-cell receptor?
Luck. I was happened to so by the way, two laboratories, Mark Davis at Stanford and us here in Toronto, he's actually younger than me by 2 years, right? And these two innocent, reckless people just took a different approach. And so at that time, the idea was that antibody was already discovered. Antibody is so complicated because the amount of antibodies made is unlimited, because you need to be able to accommodate or be prepared for any pathogens of any kind, bacteria, viruses, COVID, influenza, whatever, right? So then there is the T-cell receptors, which is actually the beginning. So in a very simplistic way, maybe antibodies are policemen and T-cell receptors are detectives, but their detectives also has a branch of identifying a particular substance in your body. Is it yourself? Please don't touch, otherwise you're going to get autoimmune disease like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and 90 other ones. Or if you're a bacteria or a virus, they have to tell the difference, and these are the T cells, and they tell it by the T cell receptor. And it takes them 4 seconds to tell whether this is a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, or yourself. If it's yourself, you move on. If it's one of those guys, then you call up your other T-cell receptors, who are killer T-cells, to come in, and then you call up eventually the antibodies, the B cells to make the antibodies, and together everybody goes to remove, the virus. So that was the T-cell receptor, the one that can tell, yes, this is foreign, kill. No, this is self, don't touch.
But do you remember that day in July? I think it was 1983.
I remember July on a Sunday afternoon. I walked in the lab. At that time, it was on 500 Sherbourne Street, the Princess Margaret. It used to be called the Ontario Cancer Institute, but now Princess Margaret Cancer Center. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was a beautiful day. Nobody was there. And then I walked in, and the number of pages was like piled all the way up to here. And I went one after the other, and after two hours, I was seeing something a little bit crazy, that there were a couple of genes that looked so different. And that was my first hunch.
That you saw it then, and it was really the needle in a haystack. It was
It
insane.
Was.
You must have just blinked
insane.
your eyes. This can't possibly be it.
It was, because nobody even knew what they should be looking for.
Well, you say you didn't, take in all the, huge implications of this for what it would do for immunology, that it might treat cancer.
Well, that we didn't know. I mean, the world, didn't know till 2010, which is like 26 years later. We didn't know that until Jim Allison showed it, that it can go after cancer too. I had no idea. I was in a cancer center, and my boss always asking me, "Tak, you work in a cancer center. You got to do something about cancer. I know you work on autoimmune disease, nice, but you got to do something about cancer." So, yeah, well, but there's no way the T cells can tell a cancer cell apart. I was wrong.
Well, I love the story. You were born in China, grew up in Hong Kong, and then moved to America and went to university first to study chemical engineering. And you were a total failure.
I hate it.
Well, this was a lucky thing, though, that you were not good at this. And then the story, continues that you were, you needed money as a student, and you were washing test tubes.
Yeah.
And they said, look, you can even make more if you do research. And then you've got more test tubes to wash.
Yeah, after I do my thing. Well, I tell you what totally wasn't my cup of tea. I got a problem set, and in chemical engineering, University of Wisconsin up to today is still one of the top, if not the top chemical engineering school in the world, right? So it's very prestigious. I got in, I was quite happy, and then I discovered that there was one problem set. It takes me about 5 minutes to finish one, but they had 100 sets of numbers. Okay, so I did 3, and I wrote on it, if these 3 are right, I do not understand why I have to do the rest of the 97. Next thing I knew, I was summoned to see the dean. And she said, I don't think you belong here.
Well, this is a win for mankind, you can say, and how great that, the test tube cleaning turns you into a scientist,
Yeah.
into a researcher, and understanding how science works, and
Yeah.
dealing with failure, and intuition, and patience, and time, and curiosity.
And luck. And lots and lots of amazing trainees. I mean, I am just so proud.
Well, you came to Toronto because of Ernest McCullough. He brought you here, the co-discoverer of the stem cell. What did you learn from him?
I love him, I miss him in so many ways. He was a very eclectic. He's so special. He's all by himself. Now, he and James Till, I mean, it was a perfect pair, Because McCullough is a clinician. He was a leukemia doctor. He is very open-minded, and he thinks not just broadly, but kind of out of the box. And Jim too is a physicist. And as a physicist, everything has to be correct down to, the last decimal place. And the two of them are awesome. One goes off thinking about things that nobody's ever thought of, and the other say, hold on a minute, before you go too far, let me measure this and that and this and that. So from this very rigid thinking, just get it done, to someone who looks out into space and say, what is missing and how can we bring it to Earth? It's fantastic.
One of McCullough's lines he said to you, is the goal is not to live forever, but to create something that will. So he was a huge influence on you.
Totally. I'm really, really, really lucky, because first I was very disciplined with Roland Rickert, the virologist. Everything has to be titrated. Everything has to be like this. And then is McCullough, and then is Howard Temin. Also, he has to be one of the smartest person I've ever met. So I was really lucky.
Yeah, all these wonderful influences. You lost your wife to cancer, 1998. Obviously, it was personally devastating. What effect did it have on your work?
Well, I think for the first year or two, it grounded to a halt. I couldn't do anything. I had my daughters with me, and then my daughters went off to college. I got together a group of friends who were really top, not just scientists in the world, but top drug developers. These people know how to make drugs, and why wouldn't I take advantage of that? Or why wouldn't I take that opportunity to try to do something? If I can't make it, I tried. If I can make it because of their help and everybody else, I stand a chance of making a small difference.
Well, you've said, especially working in cancer centers, I've seen so much pain. If I have one life to live, I'll try and make a small dent.
I think we all do. We all have to. We can't really, walk in and out of a hospital filled with patients and not feel that we want to do a little bit more.
Do you see a huge difference in the number of cancers that we can cure now, even with immunotherapy?
Enormous difference. I mean, in certain cancer, in this short career I have been in the cancer field, testicular cancer is now almost cured, right? Hodgkin lymphoma is now almost cured. Chronic myelogenous leukemia is now almost cured. So there are, and with immunotherapy, gosh, I would say 20-30% of the melanoma patients, which had 5 years and everybody, maybe 5% survival, now there are patients, 30% of the patients are out 10 years. And certain kinds of lung cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, with immunotherapy, they they have a much better chance of living longer and doing well. I mean, but we still have a long way to go. Like pancreatic cancer, brain tumors, ovarian cancer. I hate ovarian cancer. It's nasty. Breast cancer, of course. 1 in 6 Canadians going to get breast cancer, right?
You must always think of your wife in that regard. I mean, and so even now, the treatments that she would have had would be different.
Unfortunately, her breast cancer, breast cancer is not one kind. It's got about 5, 6 kinds, and within those 5, 6, there are a lot of variables. Her kind is called basal or triple negative. It is still tough. Mm-hmm. But we're trying.
So will immunotherapy, do you think, surpass ultimately the other pillars of cancer treatment, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy?
Confucius said, we all have 2 lives. The second one begins when we realize we only have one. Cancer biologists have 2 careers. The second one begins when they realize immunology is the orchestra of most life's symphonies.
So the future of this is?
Immunology combined with another drug. And we'll go to another step.
And eventually cure all cancers?
No, I'm not that crazy. Today, in Canada, 65% of all cancer patients can be considered cured. It was 5% 30 years ago, and the numbers are rising. As we all grow older, we're all either going to get cancer or we're going to get Alzheimer's.
And you're still at it, because you've had great success with companies that you've been part of, creating drugs, creating knockout mice. So I mean, you could have happily retired, but you're in the lab because you're curious, because you can make a difference, because it makes you happy.
It's all those things, but I think one thing you left out are the young people, all the seeds of all the flowers of all the tomorrows. They need a pot of soil, and that's what we trying to provide. And yes, of course, I can retire, but what am I going to do? How do I tell them that I can't be there for them? Young people always ask me, what are the elements of success, right? I think the first is yourself, your own initiative, your own thinking. The second is you have to have good collaborators, good trainees to work together. And the third is you have to have money. Because you can have a crazy idea, you need the money to support these people to go that extra step. And the last 25% is luck.
So now what interests you to study is the connection between the brain and the immune system?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it's the tip of the iceberg. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. There's so much we don't know. For example, one of my graduate students, Sean Kubley, in his master's degree, he showed that if you take a songbird, a male songbird, and suppress the immune system at birth, that male songbird, when he grows up, can only sing 3 songs instead of 50. So what does the immune system has to do with your brain, right? But it only happens in male songbirds, doesn't happen in female songbirds. That's another dimension of complexity that we don't understand. We just published a paper in a journal called Nature Cancer, very prestigious, that if your immune cells cannot make neurotransmitters, the tumor grows much faster and kills the mouse much faster. And proof beyond doubt, our immune system is controlled by our brains.
But then so much still to learn. There's a painting I've heard you cite that is sort of emblematic kind of how you think in your career, called Two Swallows. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you should look at it. The Two Swallows, as a painter, Wu Kunzhong, he was actually trained in Sorbonne in Paris in the 1940s. And then there was this one picture where there's a river and there's a house in a village. And then the title is Two Swallows. And you look at it and say, what? And then all of a sudden you go to the top right corner, there are two swallows. To me, that's so reflective of my whole career that sometimes when it's something so small, it's part of it. But we often do not know that the two swallows was meant to be the subject. The rest was just part of it.
Is discovering the T-cell receptor the greatest thing you did? Or do you think of that as a great thing, but part of your body of work?
I don't look at it that way. I certainly, under no circumstances, has it ever crossed my mind that Mark Davis and I, in our early 30s, cloned the T-cell receptor, and I could just sit back and enjoy.
Collect honorary degrees and science awards, and you should have a Nobel, by the way, but you know, who am I? I never think of it this way. I just try to enjoy whatever's in front of me, whether it's 5 steps or 5,000 steps or 5,000 miles. You know, Keep
go
going.
where the light is.
The final question we always ask is, what does being Canadian mean to you?
Being Canadian is, the word is, if I have used one word, comfort. Because we are a nation that is very comfortable with ourselves. We like to, in a comfortable way, contribute to the world. That's one word I would say. May not be the same word for everybody.
Because you've chosen, you know, to have your career here, to keep working here.
Yes, I have left Canada one day for a job in an American university. I started at 9, and at 5 o'clock, I called my secretary. I said, I'm finished of being outside of Canada. I'm coming home. And that night, I went to see my boss. I knocked on the door, 10 o'clock, McCullough. He knew I left this morning. It was on the front page of Globe and Mail. And he opened the door, he looked at me and said, Tack, would you want to come in and have a scotch? That is the kind of person I just will forever grateful.
So out of loyalty to him and various other things, you stayed always in Canada?
Yes, I have never looked at another job. That's not true. I looked at a job at University of Hawaii. More as kind of like, oh, okay, because I was told, let's come on over and have a look. No, where else would I want to be?
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I'm delighted you're here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Canada Files.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of Tony and Sherry Fell, as well as the following donors: Ted and Alice Kernahan, the Browning Watt Foundation, Mary Davey, Michael McCain and family, David and Cheryl Carr, Bryce and Nikki Douglas, Richard Wernham and Julia West, Earl and Janice Oborn, the Linwood Family Foundation, Steve and Catherine Coxford, Richard Pilosoff, Clinch House Foundation, the 63 Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association,